from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Friday night, President Donald Trump issued an executive order that strikes at the very heart of our democracy. I wish that I were exaggerating. I wish that this were some sort of a game, but the ban that imposes religious tests and keeps refugees and immigrants from entering our country is illegal. It is unconstitutional, it is immoral, and it must be overturned. The effects of this order were immediate and terrifying for people in Massachusetts and all across this country. My office got a call from an Iranian citizen who was traveling to Massachusetts to see his daughter, who is currently receiving treatment for cancer. He was denied boarding in Germany and sent back to Iran. We heard from a woman who already has an approved immigrant visa, but still hasn't found an airline that will allow her to board a flight to the United States. And a Massachusetts resident called because her cousin, who holds a student visa, was not allowed to board a flight either. Another Massachusetts resident called because her Iranian sisters were denied boarding at London Heathrow. Both have their valid J-1 visas. One is a visiting professor at Harvard, and the other is a postdoc fellow at Harvard Medical. We heard from an Iranian student who is studying at MIT. She was denied entry on Saturday, and when she tried to return on Sunday, after the temporary stay had been issued, she was denied boarding by Lufthansa. And a Massachusetts student on a student visa called because his wife was denied boarding in Switzerland. You know, none of these people are criminals. None of these people are threats. They're students at some of the world's top universities. They're doctors and scientists at some of the country's best hospitals. Most of them have already been vetted and granted the right to come to America. One is a father who wants to see his cancer-stricken daughter. They are husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends and neighbors. They are people. They are real people. They are part of what makes Massachusetts great, and they are part of what makes America great. Donald Trump's radical ban on Muslims isn't in line with American values or with our Constitution. It is also not in line with what the Republican Party stands for. In the months following the attacks of September 11th, President George W. Bush made a point to remind the United States that we were not at war against Islam. In a speech in April of 2002, he said, and I want to quote here, "America rejects bigotry. We reject every act of hatred against people of Arab background or Muslim faith. America values and welcomes peaceful people of all faiths, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, and many others. Every faith is practiced and protected here because we are one country. Every immigrant can be fully and equally American because we are one country. Race and color should not divide us because America is one country." Do Senate Republicans agree? If so, then come down here and say so. Where are you? Where are Senate Republicans when their Republican president issues an order targeting one religious group? Let's be clear about what happened here. Keeping the details secret, working with a small group of operatives inside the White House, consulting no experts in diplomacy or homeland security, and getting advice from outsiders with no actual legal authority, President Trump acted unilaterally to issue this order. And make no mistake, while it may not affect every Muslim in the world, Donald Trump's executive order is a Muslim ban, and it is unconstitutional. This is a crisis. The Senate should take up and pass Senator Feinstein's bill to overturn this illegal order right now. What's happening is shocking. It is shocking, but it is not surprising. Donald Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. During his presidential campaign, he promised, and I quote, "a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States." That's what he said. And last year, it seemed like pretty much everyone agreed that this was not acceptable in the United States of America. Speaker Paul Ryan declared that, quote, "A religious test for entering our country is not reflective of America's fundamental values. I reject it." So where are you now, Paul Ryan? Have you rejected President Trump's order to impose a religious test for entering our country? Have you introduced a bill to overturn it? You have the power. Where are you? As governor of Indiana, Vice President Mike Pence said that, quote, "Calls to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. are offensive and unconstitutional." So where are you right now, Vice President Pence? Have you called to overturn President Trump's offensive and unconstitutional order? Have you asked Republicans to introduce a bill to overturn it? You have a platform. Where are you? And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called a Muslim ban, quote, "completely and totally inconsistent with American values." So where are you right now, Mitch McConnell? Have you rejected President Trump's Muslim ban that is completely and totally inconsistent with American values? Have you introduced a bill to overturn it? You have the power. Where are you? President Trump ignored these Republican leaders, and today, these Republican leaders will not stand up for what is right. President Trump may be willing to ignore the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. And the Republican leadership in Congress may be willing to ignore the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, but the American people are not. This weekend, Americans across this country came together to reject this sort of fear and hate. The American people showed courage, even as the Republican leadership hid out. Crowds of people raced to airports across this country to welcome immigrants and refugees and to demand compliance with court rulings that gave individuals and families temporary relief, and to demand that this reckless order be rescinded. I was proud to stand with hundreds of people at Logan Airport in Boston on Saturday night, and then with more than 20,000 people in Copley Square on Sunday. We had one of the biggest demonstrations in the country. I also want to say I am in awe of the hundreds of lawyers and translators who dropped everything and spent sleepless nights in airport terminals and courts fighting for justice. Because of their tireless work, we have already been able to undo some of the damage caused by President Trump. Now, while I am encouraged by our victories in the courts this weekend, the Trump administration has derided these judges and in some instances refused to follow these orders. This is shocking and unconstitutional. Congress must act. We must act now. Congress must stand up and say to President Trump that this is not who we are. Congress must say to Donald Trump and to the world, we will not turn our backs on lawful immigrants and refugees fleeing murderers. We will not turn our backs on people who risk their own lives to protect our soldiers in Iraq and in the fight against ISIS. We will not give ISIS more recruiting material. We will not promote an imagined religious war between America and Islam. We will stand for our values, for American values, for human values. We will not be divided by hate and fear. 15 months ago, I traveled to the Greek island of Lesbos. This is the first stop for many Syrian refugees as they flee from the terrors of ISIS. And that was where I saw the shoddy, paper-thin rubber rafts that people cram onto with nothing more than a hope and a prayer that they will make it across a choppy sea. I saw the little plastic pool floaties that people put on small children, hoping that it would be enough to save them if the raft went down. And I met a 7-year-old girl who had been sent out on that perilous journey alone. I thought about what horrors her parents must have faced to hand a wad of cash to human smugglers with only the most desperate dream that their little girl would find something better on the other side. President Trump is trying to shut the door on that little girl and on countless others who are fleeing for their lives. He's trying to shut the door on children, on doctors, on students, on engineers, on husbands and wives, on grandmas and grandpas. And that's not all. President Trump is trying to shut the door on people who risked their lives helping American soldiers, people who face execution in the hands of terrorists if they are sent back. President Trump is even trying to shut the door on legal immigrants, on students and faculty, on people who work in Massachusetts and across this country, on people who have already been thoroughly screened for entry into the United States and have been granted permanent status to live and work in our country. This has nothing to do with security, nothing. Little girls fleeing from murderers are not a threat. Elderly grandparents detained at airports are not a threat. Students and teachers and people who work in Massachusetts and across the country are not a threat. Iraqi translators who put their own lives at risk to protect American soldiers are not a threat. We should welcome them. We should welcome them with open arms. That is who we are. Voices from across the political spectrum, including many of my friends from across the aisle, have already stepped forward to criticize this order. But criticism is not enough. President Trump's executive order must be overturned. We must overturn it. For those who remain unconvinced, I would like to take some time this evening to talk about some of the people who are hurt by the president's reckless, heartless, illegal, unconstitutional actions. As stories have poured in to my office, on the evening news, on social media, we have heard time and again about the consequences of President Trump's reckless and illegal order. And I would like to share some of those stories in my time tonight. I want to start with a story. I want to read one. My staff and I have spent the weekend listening to and meeting with people who've been affected. I have seen firsthand the devastating effects of President Trump's actions. And I want to start with a story of someone I met at Logan Airport on Saturday night. The story I want to read is from CBS Boston. Detainee released after federal judge grants stay on Trump's immigration freeze. Ahmad Hosseini Bey was questioned at Logan Airport Saturday while trying to get back into America after caring for his sick father in his native Iran. Hosseini Bey has lived in the Boston area for approximately 9 years after a judge granted a case brought by lawyers from the American Civil Liberties Union Saturday night. Hosseini Bey was reunited with his wife and daughter, who had traveled with him to Iran but returned 2 weeks earlier. He was not angry about his questioning. Everybody was friendly, Hosseini Bey told WBZ TV's Jim Smith. They had to do what they had to do. I'm grateful for all the people back there, but it was chaotic. Hosseini Bey's wife is now questioning what the future will be like for her family in America. It's just terrifying how my life has changed in 2 days, 3 days. She said, I don't know about the future. Last week, everything was normal. I would pick up my daughter from preschool, and she was like everyone else. I was like everyone else. But now we're different. I met with his family. This is what President Trump's order means. It means stopping people like this and telling them that their future is different Now, in America. I want to read another story. This one is from NBC Boston. Protesters rally as doctors, students blocked from entering the country after Trump's orders. At Boston Logan International Airport, at least 6 people from Iran were detained Saturday night after their flights landed in the U.S. A federal judge in New York issued a temporary stay late Saturday for all detainees affected by Trump's executive orders, which barred all refugees from entering the United States for 4 months and indefinitely halted any from Syria. Trump argued the ban is needed to keep out, quote, radical Islamic terrorists. A tweet by Samira Aghasari, an Iranian doctor, stated that she was denied boarding when she arrived for her flight to the United States from Germany. In a Skype interview from Switzerland, she told us that she had planned to come to the U.S. to start a study at Harvard Medical School analyzing tuberculosis. Quote, "My view of America, of course, doesn't change because of a decision a politician makes. My view of America changes because the land that used to be the land of those who want to be there, who want to do something good to the community and take something good from the community, that picture of America has changed for me," she said. Several students at Massachusetts colleges also tweeted that they were being blocked from entering the country. In a statement, MIT officials said that they're very troubled that Trump's executive order is affecting the university's community and are exploring options for helping impacted students. Northeastern University, in a statement to their community, offered to support their students, faculty, and staff, reminding them of their commitment to each other. Yeah, we believe in the commitment to each other, but that's what it is that Donald Trump is trying to destroy. Another story from WBUR. Somali family resettling in Lowell worries for other refugees as Trump promises restrictions. The order will have global implications, including for one newly arrived Somali family now living in Lowell. The 3 Ahmed sisters from Somalia huddled on a couch with their mother in the lobby of a busy office. Each woman wore a brightly colored headscarf and winter jacket. Each clutched a plastic bag carrying their personal documents. They are the most recent refugees to be welcomed at the International Institute of New England's Lowell Resettlement Office. And with Trump's refugee restrictions hanging in the balance, they are likely the last Somali family to enter the state for some time. Quote, "My mom and dad fled from the conflict in Mogadishu," explained Hawa Ahmed, 24. She and her twin sister were only 4 months old when their parents fled for Kenya. Hawa retold the story of her mother, Fatuma, and why she and Hawa's father left in 1993 amid the Somali Civil War. She said that it was like conflict all over the country, Hawa said. People were killing each other, like tribes. Different tribes were killing each other. Whenever they see you, they kill you. And they even used to come in the houses to rape the girls and kill them. So they had to move. The youngest daughter, Asha, was born in Kenya, where the girls grew up, and went to school and learned English. Still, they all very much consider themselves Somali. When asked about their father, one of the young women said she watched him die in 2006 from an asthma attack. She said the family didn't have enough money for a new inhaler. After beginning the refugee application process in Kenya 6 years ago, the family arrived in Manchester, New Hampshire, only a few days ago. Hawa and Muna said their arrival barely felt real, like a dream come true. And then, Hawa said, as soon as they got off the plane, they saw the news about Trump's executive orders on the airport television. Even tears were filled up in my eyes because I felt very bad for others, she said. They have more expectation. Some were even told that they are going, which city they are going. And if they stop all these things, it's going to be very painful. I just have a very sincere request to the president that he should drop out that idea. That's all. Hawa said that they know many fellow refugees in Kenya who are in the final phases of their application process. She said her aunt and cousin, who live in a refugee camp in Kampala, Uganda, had only one more interview to complete before they were hoping to meet them in Massachusetts. Now, they're not sure what will happen. I couldn't sleep last night just thinking about them, and she has been in the process for so long. And we want, if you can help her, Hawa said. That is what Donald Trump is doing to people around the world. Another story, WCVB TV. Trump's executive order worries Massachusetts family awaiting loved one. With the stroke of a pen, President Donald Trump fulfilled a campaign promise that temporarily bans more than 130 million people from entering the United States. Several people were prevented from entering Boston due to Trump's executive order. Quote, "We are very worried. We are very concerned," Omar Salem of Canton said. "I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that I could get a text from him saying, 'I'm here.'" Salem is anxiously awaiting his brother's arrival back in Massachusetts. The Syrian-born, Boston-based orthodontist was on vacation when the president signed the executive order, suspending visa entry from 7 countries. "We didn't know it was going to be that bad and that shameful," Salem said. Salem's brother thought his green card would be enough to secure his return, but the business owner is now facing uncertainty. It always starts somewhere, and we see it evolving and becoming much bigger and much more sophisticated, Salem said. While Salem is hoping to see his brother soon, his heart is heavy for the millions of refugees and visa holders who see the United States as a sanctuary of freedom and acceptance. "I really call it un-American to do this with the stroke of a pen," Salem said. The 7 countries included in the executive order may be just a starting point, as the order left room for a broader ban. That is what Donald Trump is doing around the world. Another story. This is a Facebook post from Nikki Ramatiti, a student at MIT. "I just got back home to Ron, and I figured I should break this silence. I want to start by saying how grateful I am to all the friends, faculty, alums, sorority sisters, staff, and administration at MIT and other parts of the U.S. who have contacted me in the past couple of hours. My inbox is flooded with messages and emails of love and support. I am truly speechless, grateful, and proud to be part of the MIT community. I have never been subjected to any form of religious or racial discrimination at MIT. Our community is extremely diverse, inclusive, supportive, and accepting of individuals and their backgrounds. But I cannot believe all this love is coming from the same country that banned me from entering its borders just a couple of hours ago. I don't want to get to the political mess that has created this situation for me and many others. I just want to share what millions of other people and I are going through, and simply what it feels like to be an Iranian and targeted to such racism and discrimination, things I have been very familiar with most of my life. I currently have a valid multiple entry student visa that I've used for the past year and a half, and I have traveled very smoothly. Thank you, Obama. I came home to Iran to visit my parents and family. I suspected I would not be able to travel as easily as before with the new president, so I extended my stay. And here's the story of what happened this past week. On Wednesday, I woke up to the announcement of a new executive order by President Trump that would restrict entry for Syrian refugees and citizens of 7 majority Muslim countries: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen, for 30 days. As BBC Persian, one of the reliable sources here, contacted immigration attorneys and politicians, this order was read and interpreted as, quote, issuance of any types of immigrant and non-immigrant visas would be banned for citizens of those countries for 30 days. The president had not yet signed this order, so the ban was not yet effective. I changed my flight to another one that would get me to Boston on Saturday night with a transfer in Qatar. It was rumored that the president signed the order once I was on my way to the airport, and it was executed while I was in my first flight to Doha. But I looked on the White House website, BBC, and the Washington Post, and nothing had been published yet. When I got to Doha, I was stopped at the gate for my U.S. flight. We found out that the ban, which is effective for 90 days now instead of 30 days, included everyone currently holding an immigrant, student, or tourist visa, as well as green card holders. We heard a lot of people were deported at the American border in different cities. About 30 other Iranians and I were stuck in Doha, waiting for flights back to Tehran. Among them were old couples trying to go and see their children in the U.S., 2 old women trying to be with and help their pregnant daughters there for their 3rd trimesters, students who had just gotten their visas, and families who had sold their belongings back home so they could build a better life in the U.S. All these people had gotten visas legally and had gone through background checks. The president had said that the goal of this order was dealing with illegal immigration. Do any of these people sound like illegal immigrants? This will not secure the borders from terrorism and illegal immigrants. It will only increase racism in the American society. The president is trying to make Islamophobia a norm and a policy by which he wants to lead the country. There has not been a single terrorist activity from those 7 countries listed above in the U.S. If you feel like helping millions of people facing this, please contact your representatives or senators in your areas and ask them to fight against this absurd ban. Reach out to friends and ask them to do the same. Please also let me and everyone else know how we can contribute to this. As I was stuck in Doha with other Iranians, I was telling stories of interactions with many of the Americans I know. Please know that I love and respect all of you because you have always treated me with love and respect. This is who Donald Trump is trying to keep out of the country. Another story, this time from CNN. A Syrian teen was headed to MIT, and then came the ban. Mohammad Hassan was ecstatic when he got the acceptance letter. All through high school, the 18-year-old had one goal in mind: get an engineering degree from the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology. But Hassan is from Damascus, Syria, and Friday, he had his hopes crushed through no fault of his own. When President Trump signed an executive order on immigration, temporarily banning citizens from certain Muslim-majority countries, Syria was one of the 7. Quote, "Now Trump's orders will prevent me from going there," he told CNN. "My dreams are basically ruined." Hassan had been looking forward to his journey to the Cambridge campus in the fall. He says he had been offered a scholarship. He's read and reread that letter from MIT dozens of times. Dear Mahmoud, on behalf of the admissions committee, it is my pleasure to offer you admission to the MIT class of 2021. You stood out as one of the most talented and promising students in one of the most competitive applicant pools in the history of the Institute. Hassan doesn't know what he will do next. This is who Donald Trump is determined to keep out of America. Another story. This one is from our office. A constituent from Concord, Massachusetts, came into my office in Boston just this morning, Monday, January 30th, 2017, just today. And she came looking for more information on the current status of the Muslim ban on behalf of her husband, who was originally born in Iran. Now, she explained that when he was young, he received refugee status in Australia for religious persecution, and he was raised in the Baha'i faith. He now has dual citizenship in Iran and Australia, and is a green card holder of 10 years here in the United States. He is the vice president of a startup company that requires him to travel outside the country often, but has decided that because of the latest executive orders to stay grounded in the United States until further notice. He is currently safe in the United States. Iman has also decided to begin his United States citizenship application. And the couple has 2 young children that they are raising in the United States. Afraid to travel outside the United States on business because of Donald Trump's ban. Another story. This is a story via the Wall Street Journal. Iraqi interpreter Laith al-Haidar received multiple death threats for working with the American military at the height of the war in his country. In return for helping the U.S., he and tens of thousands of other Iraqis were promised U.S. immigration visas. Nearly 4 years after he applied, the 41-year-old father of 2 is still waiting for a visa. And now he faces a new setback. President Donald Trump signed an executive order suspending immigration from several countries with a Muslim majority, including Iraq, and a temporary ban on all refugees. Mr. Haidar is among the roughly 58,000 Iraqi applicants for U.S. immigrant visa and refugee resettlement under the federal programs that promised to fast-track entry for Iraqis who worked with the U.S. government and other institutions deemed critical to the U.S.-led effort in Iraq, according to the State Department. A similar program for Afghans who've worked with the U.S. government may also be at risk. At least 1 Iraqi and 2 Afghans who worked with the U.S. government and also qualify for expedited immigration visas were turned away from American ports of entry on Friday and Saturday, a State Department official said, adding that several more were prevented from boarding planes to the United States. A substantial backlog of applications remains in part because Congress limits the number of visas that can be granted each year. Frustration with visa delays has now been aggravated by Mr. Trump's executive orders. Critics of the visa ban say it abandons thousands of valuable allies abroad and risks deterring such people from working with the U.S. in the future at a time when Mr. Trump is promising a more aggressive military posture abroad. Quote, "These guys laid their lives on the line alongside American soldiers and got paid a fraction of what I made," said Jake Thomas, a U.S. Army veteran who worked with Mr. Haidar in Iraq and who now lives in Georgia. "If they want out, we need to honor our promises and get them out." Mr. Thomas is one of several U.S. military officers who have written letters to the State Department appealing for Mr. Haidar to get a visa. He said he sympathizes with some of the views regarding immigration that Mr. Trump campaigned on, but, he added, Iraqis like Mr. Haidar, quote, were singled out and shot at for serving the United States, and we made a promise, he said. Mr. Thomas said he knew of 5 Iraqi interpreters who were killed in the 15 months of his last tour in Iraq, including 3 who were gunned down in their homes for working with the U.S. military. Now, President Trump continues to ignore the damage that he is doing to the safety of our country and our servicemen and servicewomen overseas, brave men and women who risk their lives to help U.S. soldiers in Iraq have already been caught up in the president's unconstitutional order. You know, I just want to associate myself with the man who had been there, the soldier who had been there. He said, America made a promise. I believe in an America that keeps its promises. Donald Trump's order breaks our promises. Another story, this one from Marcola via PRI. The Iraqi linguist who worked side by side with U.S. troops in Baghdad put her life on the line for America's war effort. Now her family is in danger back in Iraq, and she fears her efforts to get them to safety in America are all but doomed. I'm scared. The chance to see my family reunited again is very slim now, she says. People like me and my family who helped and supported America, I believe we should be reunited. The history of the United States is to support people and help them, not to separate families. Marcola was just 18 and living in Baghdad shortly after American tanks rolled into the Iraqi capital in 2003. She was recruited to work for the U.S. military. Her role caught the attention of Iraqi militants. They sought revenge. They burned down Marcola's house, kidnapped her father, and murdered her husband. Fearing for her life, she applied for a U.S. visa. And in 2013, after 7 years of waiting, she received the permission she had been waiting for. But Marcola had to leave her parents and siblings behind, even though she says they too were in danger because of her service to U.S. troops. She says she tries to talk with her family in Baghdad daily. Every day, their lives are in danger, she says. They have to change their address, move from place to place. They live in the unknown. Marcola is worried that the refugee ban proposed Wednesday means her parents and siblings will never reach American soil. We already been in extreme vetting, she says. I understand and I respect the U.S. rules and the safety and national security. I understand that and I respect that. However, there are people in Iraq who have a long history of supporting America in Iraq and Afghanistan. The linguists, the translators, they deserve and they need their papers to be expedited. These are the people that Donald Trump is keeping out of America. Another story from Mother Jones. Immoral, stupid, and counterproductive. National security experts slam Trump's Muslim ban. Quote, at the moment we need the most, we're telling these people, get screwed. While Trump's executive order claims to be in the interest of, quote, protecting the nation, experts in national security and counterterrorism who spoke with Mother Jones argue that it poses potentially disastrous immediate and long-term security threats to the nation and to U.S. personnel overseas. Not only is it immoral and stupid, it is also counterproductive, says Patrick Skinner, a former CIA terrorism case officer who now works at Sufan Group, a security consulting firm. Quote, we've got military, intelligence, and diplomatic personnel on the ground right now in Syria, Libya, and Iraq who are working side by side with the people embedded in combat and training and advising. At no time in the U.S.'s history have we depended more on local, and I mean local, partnerships for counterterrorism. We need people in Al-Bab, Syria. We depend on people in certain parts of eastern Mosul, Iraq. Insert Libya. At the exact moment we need the most, we're telling these people, get screwed. Kirk W. Johnson, who spent a year on the reconstruction in Fallujah in Iraq with U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, echoes Skinner's fears. This will have immediate national security implications in that we are not going to be able to recruit people to help us right now. And people are not going to step forward to help us in any future wars if this is our stance. The U.S.-led war on ISIS is but one of a front of constellation of fights against extremist groups that could be hampered by Trump's decision. Quote, the U.S. is officially banning people in these countries. At the same time, we're trying to build up local support to fight ISIS, Skinner says. It takes a long time to build trust with these people. You have to start over and say, okay, starting now, trust me. How many times can you get away with that? It also sends a message that groups like the so-called Islamic State can exploit. Elizabeth Goitein, the co-director of the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program, says, the message this projects is that America sees Muslims as a threat, not specific actors who are intent on committing terrorist acts. The message that America really is at war with Islam will be ISIS's best friend. BuzzFeed reporters Mike Giglio and Munzar al-Awad spoke with 5 current or former ISIS fighters who cited Trump's divisiveness as a factor that will weaken America. They added that his rhetoric against Muslims will help them reinforce their narrative that America and the West are fighting not just terrorism, but fighting Islam itself. Trump will shorten the time it takes for us to achieve our goals, said one. Meanwhile, the very allies who have operated alongside U.S. personnel in war zones for years, contractors and translators like Darwish, are once again being abandoned. For the past decade, Johnson has been leading an effort to resettle Iraqi allies, many of whom, he says, face torture, kidnapping, and death after collaborating with American soldiers. It all started in 2006 when he heard from an Iraqi USAID colleague who had been identified by a militia. The militia left a severed pig's head on his doorstep, along with a message saying that it would be his head next. Despite his years of helping the United States, the U.S. government offered no help, and he had to flee the country with his wife. Quote, we're not going to be able to recruit people to help us right now, and people are not going to step forward to help us in any future wars if this is our stance. This is what Donald Trump's executive order is doing. It is putting Americans at risk around the world. Another story from Newsweek. Spy veterans say Trump's Muslim country visa ban will hurt recruitment. President Donald Trump's temporary ban on immigrants from 7 Muslim-majority nations takes a major recruiting tool out of the hands of U.S. spy handlers, say a growing number of intelligence veterans. For decades, CIA and U.S. military intelligence spy recruiters have held out the promise of eventual resettlement in America to induce foreigners to turncoat and work secretly for the United States against terrorist groups or repressive governments. In reality, many were caught before they ever made it. But during the Cold War, countless Eastern Europeans living under communist rule, and more recently, Muslims across the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, have worked secretly for U.S. spy agencies on the promise that they or their children would eventually be extracted. Another effective recruiting tool for U.S. operatives has been to offer their agents' families medical care or education in the United States. Those inducements, a primary recruiting tool in Muslim lands, were effectively suspended with Trump's executive order Friday to temporarily ban immigration from 7 critical targets of the U.S. spy agencies: Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, Somalia. The Departments of State and Homeland Security, the other stipulates, may allow entry from those countries on, quote, a case-by-case basis, close quote. But it's a bulky arrangement and not likely to appeal to the managers of the CIA's highly secretive operations directorate, its espionage and covert action arm. Intelligence veterans with vast counterterrorism experience are expressing dismay about how the order will affect their spy operations. These individuals often put themselves at the risk of death for working with the United States. And without the ability to offer them safety, we will be reducing the likelihood that those in countries targeted by the ban will work with us in the future. Philip Lojas, a decorated veteran of the U.S. Special Operations Command and CIA, tells Newsweek, quote, we relied heavily on local translators, many of whom have gone on to forge productive lives for themselves here in the States, Lojas added. Why would they take such a risk if they knew that they would face retribution or death by staying in their home countries? Absolutely, agreed Cindy Storer, a former member of the CIA intelligence team that tracked al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. It hurts, she said in a brief interview. Capital H-U-R-T-S. Imagine, she said, if the ban had been in place when Jamal al-Fadl, a Sudanese Muslim and key al-Qaeda operative, showed up at the American embassy in the mid-1990s and volunteered to defect to the United States. FBI counterterror agents brought him into the U.S. where he provided, quote, a major breakthrough of intelligence on the creation, character, direction, and intentions of al-Qaeda, according to the official 9/11 Commission reports. And that is what Donald Trump is putting an end to. Another story. The Washington Post. Dissent memos circulating in the State Department over Trump's policy on refugees and immigrants. You know, for this one, Foreign Service officers have written a memo and they've shared it with the Washington Post in opposition to President Trump's executive order. And here are excerpts from a leaked dissent memo by U.S. Foreign Service officers regarding the executive order. It will immediately sour relations with these 7 countries, as well as much of the Muslim world, which sees the ban as religiously motivated. These governments of these countries are important allies and partners in the fight against terrorism, regionally and globally. By alienating them, we lose access to the intelligence and resources we need to fight the root causes of terror abroad before the attack occurs within our borders. It will increase anti-American sentiment. It will have an immediate and clear humanitarian impact. It will have a negative impact on the U.S. economy. Looking beyond its effectiveness, this ban stands in opposition to the core American and constitutional values. This ban stands in opposition to the core American and constitutional values that we as federal employees took an oath to uphold. The United States is a nation of immigrants. starting from its very origins. The concept that immigrants and foreigners are welcome is an essential element of our society, our government, and our foreign policy. So too is the concept that we are all equal under the law, and that we as a nation abhor discrimination, whether it is based on race, religion, sex, or national origin. Combined together, that means we have a special obligation to maintain an immigration system that is as free as possible from discrimination, that does not have implied or actual religious tests, and that views individuals as individuals, not as part of stereotyped groups. Banning travelers from these 7 countries calls back to some of the worst times in our history. Laws enacted in the 1920s, which lasted through the 1960s, severely restricted immigration based on national origin and, in some cases, race. The decision to restrict the freedom of Japanese Americans in the U.S. and foreign citizens who wanted to travel to settle in the U.S. during the 1940s has been a source of lasting shame for many in our country. Decades from now, we will look back and realize we made the same mistakes as our predecessors, shutting borders in a knee-jerk reaction instead of setting up systems of checks that protect our interests and values. We do not need to place a blanket ban that keeps 220 million people, men, women, and children, from entering the United States to protect our homeland. We do not need to alienate entire societies to stay safe. And we do not need to sacrifice our reputation as a nation which is open and welcoming to protect our families. It is well within our reach to create a visa process which is more secure, which reflects American values, and which would make the department proud. Again, this is a dissent memo circulating in the State Department over President Trump's policy on refugees and immigrants. And this is what Donald Trump's executive order does. It makes us less safe. It is wrong. Another story from a Boston Globe op-ed, Matt Gallagher, who is a veteran. The headline, "Trump rejects the Muslims who helped us." The bravest person I've ever known went by the nickname Serge Knight. He was as physically imposing as the infamous music producer, but he was calm and big-hearted with a smile as wide as a canyon. A Sudanese Muslim, Serge served as my Scouts platoon's interpreter during the deployment to Iraq in 2007 and 2008, and he went on every patrol and mission with us, no matter the circumstances. He'd survived multiple roadside bomb attacks, had lost 3 young children to the bombings in the first Gulf War, and yet still believed in America and what America represented to him and his family. Though he doubted he'd ever get to our country, he aspired for his children to do so. "Perhaps my grandchildren will go to school with your kids," he once told me with typical paternal charm. I'd like that very much. And I felt the same. We all did. He was one of us. President Trump's recent executive order on Muslim refugees and immigrants works to ensure that such a dream never comes true. Muslim allies, including interpreters like Serge in Iraq and Afghanistan, have done more for the United States during the past 16 years of war than most Americans will even think of doing in their entire lives. Yet we're abandoning them in their hour of need, wrapping ourselves up in a big, billowing flag of fear and pretending it's safety. We're also abandoning Middle East refugees fleeing the very terrorists we've professed to combat, who have seen their homes and lives destroyed and now seek shelter on our shores the same way that immigrants have for generations. This is a national disgrace. The president's executive order betrays American values and weakens our national security all at once. Our country was founded as a haven. Trump and his administration seem intent on turning it into a medieval fortress. In November, shortly after the election, I joined a nonpartisan group in Washington, D.C. to advocate for Muslim refugees and immigrants, Veterans for American Ideals, a project of human rights first. There was a gray pall over the city and a deep sense of uncertainty for what awaited, even in Republican offices. No one knew then what we all know now. Trump really did mean to do what he said on the campaign trail. Time and again, Democrats and Republicans alike told us the United States already has in place the best and most thorough refugee and immigrant screening process on the planet. A prominent Republican advisor assures us that Trump's, quote, extreme vetting idea was just a ploy to rustle up votes. A national security official suggested that we should be more thankful that Congress had saved the special immigrant visa program for interpreters and translators who served with the U.S. military, and maintained that the amount of issued visas was sufficient despite the overflowing backlog of requests. A shouting match ensued. Enraged veterans can have our own sort of diplomatic style. I look back at that week with both pride and despondency. On one hand, to see so many young American veterans standing up for the principles of our nation, often the very same principles that led them to enlist in the military to begin with, was stirring. We tried, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, to convey to politicians the importance of remaining true to our Muslim brothers and sisters in arms. We also tried to remind them of the secondary and tertiary effects of not honoring the bonds forged in combat. On the other hand, bearing witness to how easily dismissed entire lives and formative experiences can be by fellow citizens, let alone elected representatives, was rather dismaying. Even in our era of yellow ribbon patriotism and star-spangled banner grandiosity, veterans' stories of heroic Muslim translators and brave, dedicated local Iraqis and Afghans were sometimes met with hollow stares and empty platitudes in Washington. What we were telling these officials defied their preconceived notions about vets and Muslims, and how vets of the terror wars were supposed to feel about Muslims. What we were telling them was that American security was dependent on opening our doors to as many vetted refugees and immigrants as possible, not barricading ourselves and saying, we're not that America anymore. What we were telling them was what we knew more than any other group of Americans, what the hearts and souls of the Middle Eastern people were, and that those hearts and souls were so very much like our own. These are just some of the stories of what Donald Trump is doing to people here in America, to Americans abroad, and to people around the world. This executive order is illegal, it is unconstitutional, it is immoral, and it must be overturned by Congress. I understand that under the rules, the majority can stop any senator after speaking for an hour post-cloture, but there is a bit more I would like to say, and so therefore I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 10 additional minutes.
No, she hasn't.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will continue with the story that was published this morning in the Boston Globe. This is from a veteran who is writing of his own experiences. He says Trump's executive order, which seeks to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States, will only embolden those very same people who already had a near zero chance of gaining entry to our country to begin with. This order proves too many ISIS and Al-Qaeda talking points are true about what the United States really is and will serve as an excellent recruiting tool for those organizations and others. This executive order isn't about national security. It's about fear-mongering for ends we can only guess at. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. As my friend Phil Clay, winner of the National Book Award and a Marine veteran, pointed out last year, Ronald Reagan's City on a Hill speech outlined in America for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. I get that people are scared, Clay continued, but it's only during frightening times when you get to find out if your country really deserves to call itself the home of the brave. Donald Trump's zero-sum worldview and flimsy understanding of the intricacies of modern war and terrorism threaten to undermine our republic. His policy on Middle Eastern refugees and immigrants must be checked and resisted by citizens of all political stripes, legislators of both major parties, and the judicial courts. After 16 years of war, much of my generation of military veterans stands with the Middle Eastern people we sweated, labored, and bled with, and sometimes died for. It's going to be a fight, but it's one we're not going to lose. The legacy of America's past is at stake, as well as the soul of its future. Matt Gallagher is the author of the novel Youngblood and the memoir Kaboom, Embracing the Suck in a Savage Little War. He is an Iraq War veteran and a former U.S. Army captain, and he wrote this morning in the Boston Globe. We are here tonight because this country is in crisis. We are here tonight because it is a constitutional crisis, because it is a moral crisis. We are here tonight to stand up and ask the rest of the United States Senate to overturn Donald Trump's executive order. We have that power. All we need is the courage to stand up and do what is right. This is why we came to the United States Senate, to stand up and do what is right. I call on the rest of the Senate to overturn Donald Trump's illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral executive order. Mr. President, I yield.